Welcome to the celebration tonight. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm good. I'm joining you from Sherman Hill, and I'll try not to let it get in the way of my driving.
Now, as you can see, it is a celebration, so we have our party hats on, and Matt has his party horns.
Yeah, well, you know, Nat gave me a bunch of hats, and there were 2 pink ones, so I felt like I was obliged, to be honest.
Exactly. So tonight, we're going to be taking a bit of a look back at Train Sim World and how it's progressed over the years. I mean, we're looking back from beyond when I even started working here, to some of the early days of Train Simulator as well, aren't we?
Oh yeah, it's we're going right back to pretty much the inception, and it probably goes back further than you think. But we do sometimes get questions in various streams about when did it start and so forth. So basically, we're going to start there.
Exactly, and I've seen a couple of questions from people on the forums and in the chats asking if this is going to be a Q&A style stream, and that's not really the vibe we're going for tonight. We will make sure that if you've got questions, they'll get answered they'll get answered in the next Q&A stream that we schedule. But tonight is definitely a look back at what we've accomplished, some talking about the milestones we've achieved. And yes, we recognise that there are areas we still need to improve, but this is very much here's what we're proud of that we've done right.
Yeah, and it's also a call out, you know, it's maybe there have been a bunch of things going on behind the scenes. So let's just talk about them and, you know, get everybody, you know, see exactly what's happened. Because it's amazing, actually. It's one of those things you go back and look at what the game looked like when it first launched, or actually look at what it looked like, as you'll be able to shortly, what it looked like before it launched. And, yeah, then you start seeing that we've come a long, long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for anybody that's wondering, obviously the 5-year birthday was actually on Wednesday, but unfortunately we weren't able to host a stream on Wednesday, so that's why we're hosting it today. And we were going to bring cake, but we ate that on Wednesday.
The cake was eaten on Wednesday. I was going to try and bring some more cake tonight, but unfortunately I haven't been back from Alexandra Palace exhibition that long in the office, so yeah, that didn't happen.
Did you meet some of our Train Sim World fans?
I did, actually. Amaze Taze, Hentis, and a number of other people. So if I saw you at the weekend, then it was great to see you. Thanks for shouting out. If you didn't say your name and you saw us anyway, thanks for coming. And if you didn't come, then, well, you missed a great weekend, actually. It was really good.
And what I will say is, if anybody in the chat did come prepared to tonight's stream with cake, please take a picture of it and tag me in off topic on the forums. I would like to see what cake you've had. So let's have a look at tonight's schedule. Obviously, it's just the birthday stuff, but the plan is to be going from 8 until 9:30, 10ish tonight until we're done. Just talking about the story so far, really. So that'll conclude this weekend's March Madness streams, but we will be hosting more next weekend as well. So should we dig right into it, Matt? Should we start talking about some of the early days of Train Simulator? I believe it was then.
Well, actually, so I mean, we're going back to Train Sim 2014.
Right.
It is where our story begins.
Is this where, are we going to have an evening of trying to figure out the naming of everything? Because we certainly haven't kept the naming simple of our franchises, have we?
Well, I'll try and keep consistent, but
okay.
Shout at me if I get it wrong, or incomplete. So, and I'll try and explain where some of the origins come from as well, because it leaks into things like the file name of the game these days as well. Is not TSW, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, So we start off in Train Sim with Train Sim 2014. So I was the producer of Train Sim 2014, and it was the first one I produced.
Yeah.
And at the end or during the course of Train Sim 2014, and as it ended, the engineering team started looking at building a ground-up, grassroots new train simulator. And at this point, we're talking like really early, really super early, starting to learn Unreal 4 and all this kind of nonsense. It was really early days. And after completion of TS 2014, I moved on to being, my job role changed from being head of third party to being technical designer on Train Sim, on Train Sims.
Train Sims.
It was just technical designer, really,
Okay.
was the goal. But it was looking at it was looking at what we wanted to do going forward. So basically, I worked with the engineering team, and we started looking at what it was going to be. So bear in mind, at this point, we don't know what route it's going to be. We don't know what trains it's going to be. We have no train sim at all. We have nothing. So it's kind of like really exciting, but
I was going to
utterly
say,
daunting.
how excited were you at this point? Like,
Oh, it was incredible.
Yeah.
It was incredible, and also scary as heck.
Yeah.
Because it's just like you especially for example, you say, we want to sort of define how track is laid. Okay, well in TS1 that's done.
Yeah.
You just have to okay, there is no track system. There's nothing at all. And it's kind of like, well, it can be anything. Well, that means, wow, okay. And that applies to everything. How do you make a train in 3ds Max that works in this game? Well, there are no rules. It can be anything. And, it's kind of like, and you also, as what we found actually with Sandpatch Grade, skipping ahead somewhat a little bit, but what we found was actually sometimes, some of those were not great decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like in retrospect, and Sandpatch Grade came out actually with really bad performance because it's kind of like, throw some of that there, that looks good, do that. And it's just like, and what we look at some of the decisions, some of the way we make things now versus the way we made Sandpatch Grade, the original release of Sandpatch Grade, is horrifying. So it's but these are all the lessons we've learned.
I was going to say, so did you go into it with a vision of sort of let's dream big, and then hindsight has ended up being a wonderful thing?
Oh, it's more that we don't. Yeah, I mean, from a vision perspective, it was dream big, and we're still on that path. We've not cut that path. We're not finished with the vision. The original design. I wrote a proposal which I presented to the board before TS 2014 for what I've envisaged a next train simulator to be, and we're only part of the way down that even. Mm-hmm. So there was lots more that we can look at, but in terms of where things kind of got awry and where we've been learning an awful lot is it is more the technical aspect of it. It's like so Unreal is super, super powerful. You can do so much in Unreal, but with great power comes great responsibility, so the man says. Yeah? And this is where the lack of responsibility essentially is. Just like, well, I didn't really understand. Yes, for example, a specific example was if you used the original Sandpatch Grade when it first launched, and then used the version that was a little bit after, when the performance became a lot better, and then everyone said, "Oh, the grass looks terrible now." And the reason the grass looked terrible after that is because in the original version on Sandpatch Grade, we'd used like really cool alpha textures, and it turned out that was a stupid idea, but it was too late to do anything substantial without reauthoring tons of stuff. So what we had to do at that point was, okay, going forward we know how we can do it better. For Sandpatch Grade, to get the frame rate out of the bottom, we need to just drop the alpha textures down, and drop the layer at the number of grayscales in the alpha. And of course that meant it didn't look as good as it used to, because we had these super high def lovely textures alpha before, so that brought the frame rate up. It was one of the many things that brought the frame rate up. But it's just another example of, if the tool says you can have 256 levels of alpha transparency, why would you not?
Yeah.
It turns out, that's why.
That's why not.
And we've gone through a large amount of learning about this is why not that, and this is why not this, and actually we can do as much of that as you want. And so it's kind of like, so we've kind of built up a much better idea of that, and we are still learning lessons.
Yeah.
As we keep pushing the game in and the sim into different areas, and sort of longer routes or more this, more that. It's like, actually, if we do more of this, then we need to think about these other things. So it's a constantly evolving process, but yeah, it's having a blank slate is terrifying, as well as a wonderful opportunity. So it's amazing what we've been able to do with that. So the first stage of the development, essentially the engineering team brought a small number of TS1 models over into Unreal, just basically importing the 3ds Max files and then giving them a very basic brush of materials to make them load and work. So there was no actual effort done particularly to make them look especially good or appropriate. And you're going to see some of those models tonight. So the first thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to probably repeat this particularly when we get to showing some of the models, is please don't run away saying, oh, they're going to make her.
Right,
because
so
what you're seeing here is 7-year-old models that don't exist anymore.
So you want... there's someone actually in the chat said, now we need Natalie to tell us what alpha transparency is. Yes, I don't know what that is. What is alpha transparency, Matt?
So when you make grass,
yeah,
and there's all sorts of things it applies to. But when you make grass, you have a big square texture,
yeah,
right? And you draw the grass, and you've got the grass on there. And if you imagine you've got blades of grass, it's not too difficult to imagine, I hope.
No,
but it's not a hard dot. It's a horizontal end. It's got a furry end where where the grass is. So everywhere you want the background to come through, you have to effectively cut it out.
Oh.
Yeah. So effectively, what you then have is the bit that's that you can see, and then effectively you set the rest of it, all of the bits in between the grass, to have an alpha transparency layer, right? And what we've done in that particular instance was, if you have a diagonal line on a computer, then it kind of gets more pixely.
Yeah.
Because computers can't do diagonals, they can do horizontal and vertical, and that's it. And using the 256 layers of alpha transparency, you can really smooth that out, and it looks lovely, and kills the performance through the floor dead. So, because the thing is with grass, you've got lots of grass layering on top of each other. Mm-hmm. So it's not just rendering one thing, it's rendering that and maybe 50 things behind it all together, and all moving in different ways. So this is where alpha transparency causes a problem, and where variable alpha transparency is just horrific. So that was a lesson to, if you're going to use variable alpha transparency, use it incredibly sparingly.
Okay. I imagine there's been many occasions where a lesson like that was learned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, many. The team have learned an awful lot as we've gone. Like I said, in terms of some things don't matter, and we can kind of go a bit crazy with them, and some things matter so much that we need to be like, use one of these only, and no more.
Okay. So, we will shortly be showing everybody some videos, and like you said, you don't want us to accidentally set off the speculation.
No, what you're seeing in these videos is stuff that dates back to 2015. So these videos were recorded in and around 2015, and you're looking at imports from TS1, and these were quick jobs. And they literally don't exist anymore. So, so there's 2 or 3 models here, some of which are in the game now fully, but they weren't these versions. And you're going to see that. So, for example, the 52, the Western, that was the TS1 import, versus the Western that's in the game right now was a completely rebuilt from scratch, properly built for TSW locomotive. And there are a couple of others that you'll see in here as well that will look variably bad quality, because again, they weren't built for that sort of image, and they were built 7 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, some of these videos, like when you took them, I imagine you had no idea that we were going to be sharing them 7 years later. This is
I mean, these videos, I just happened to be I was looking around thinking, I wonder if I've still got some of those videos I shared internally. And maybe they'd be quite fun to share with everybody in terms of, look how far the game has come since these. And you've never seen this. These videos all date, like I said, from around 2015, when we launched in 2017. and Sandpatch Grade didn't exist. None of the trains that you're using now existed.
Yeah.
In fact, no routes existed. The route you're going to see in these videos was one I put together, so you can just imagine how terrible it is. So, but the videos were put together so that other people could sort of see and explain. And as we show the videos, I'm going to just you either you'll be able to see exactly what it is, or I'll explain some of the reason behind it. So yeah, like I said, we've got the 52 and the Mark 1 coaches were the first trains that were imported in, and one of it was not neat, but one of the things that was different back then was you couldn't get on or off the train. So whereas everybody is used now to open the door, climb up the ladders, and all this cool stuff, that didn't exist. We were a long way from that stuff, as it turned out. And the way it worked actually was you just walked up into the general vicinity of the cab and pressed a button, and you became in the cab. It's it was fantastic. So we had. So we had that, and there's some other cool stuff there. So, like I said, without any kind of art teams on there, it's essentially the engineering team and myself. Although the engineering team did include a couple of people who were also artists, but their main job was engineering. Essentially, what I did is I put together the UE4 test demo route using UE standard, all of the example assets that comes with UE4, which weren't a big library at the time. Again, there was no UE4 marketplace. We're talking 7 years ago. And some assets we made for Eurofishing. So at the time, our other team were making the Eurofishing game, and they'd started making some UE4 assets. So I pinched them.
You stole their assets.
I stole their assets and started using them to doll up my route, which you will see in the first video. I don't know if you want to kick the first video off.
Let's kick off the first video, yeah. So here we go.
So you can see on this video, the 52, the backdrop there in the mountains is is from UE4. The grass is a standard example asset, and that's a fishing tent.
I'll just pause that now.
So that's a fishing tent that came from Eurofishing, and I think that station lamp probably came from Settle and Carlisle Line or something daft.
Yeah.
But you can see actually, if you restart that video and just capture that as the 52 just goes by, there's a really interesting thing on the side of it.
Okay, hold on. Let's see. I'm gonna have to pause it. Well, it's there now.
That'll do. So a couple of things. So first of all, the track has no texture. This is not the track we ended up using. This was a test asset. In fact, I think I designed the rail, and someone else made the sleeper, and we sort of cobbled it together to make some track that wasn't completely terrible. Obviously none of that exists anymore. That's all gone and has been done better. But you notice on the side there's a number of the loco on the back, the name on the locos on the side. They were all dynamically done, and then it also says formation name blah.
Yeah.
Which is the white text splattered on the side of the train. And this was because we wanted to make it so that formations could, instead of just numbering the side of the vehicle the same way we'd always done it, what I wanted was, actually the engineering team did this one, I take no credit for any of that for this. What they wanted was to make it to where consists could have numbers. So if you think about the Class 101 on Diesel Legends, or most Southern Region units, or the Class 166, 166, 123 is the formation. Is effectively the formation number, and 166, 123 will be made up of 3 different vehicles with their own numbers, so which you can't really do previously. And so what we wanted to do here was make sure that the vehicle could render formation numbers. So that's kind of the reason. So again, it's a bit of debug text splattered on the side of the train just so that we could prove that it had the right formation number, and we get that rendering. But as you can see, this is the old TS1 52. It's the TS1 Mark 1s that have been borrowed and brought into the game along with a Eurofishing bivvy. So it's cool. Big thank you to the fishing team for the assets that I half-inched. I did make this really big thing, which unfortunately didn't get captured into this. So this route is kind of a loopy, and it just goes around. It's like a spiral, and there's one bit where it crosses over itself, and I needed a bridge, and so I ended up using there's like a wooden jetty type thing in fishing. I ended up using that, rescaling it terribly, and creating this rickety old wooden bridge. I was so proud of it, and the fishing team was horrified.
I wish I could have seen that. That is genuinely disappointing that we can't see that.
So, well, if I ever find them, maybe we'll do another stream, because I am still looking for some more. But these are what I found, and I was quite pleased I found this lot. So if we move on to the next video, actually, this is a cab ride of part of the route. So you can count, like I say, numerous issues with this.
Yes.
We want to go ahead and play it. But we've got bridge asset, which I got imported from TS1. We've got track working. We've got the cab is all working. All the dials are working. This is I can't state how early this is in dev, and we've got this is all powered by Simulgraph, and it's looking good. And like I said, I'm no route builder, but this is the extent of my route building on this project, and I was quite pleased with that. It proved the point. It meant that we could take some slightly better screenshots, than we've been able to take previously, because they were all done on dev levels, and which they were all grey without any kind of green on them. So, so we did some. So it was quite interesting.
So again, this is what, from 2015.
Yeah.
So yeah.
2 years before we launched.
2 years before you launched. I mean, I'm going to bring us back to our faces now. But so how long did you spend working on it before it was released? Because obviously, if that's 2 years before it launched, what was the lead up?
I would say 3 years in total before 2017. I mean, there was bits and pieces of research and stuff and experimentation going on in the engineering team as sort of side projects before it was kicked off more fully. But this is yeah. So I would say probably about 3 years of work in total.
Yeah. Calido said it must have been a thrill to see the cab instruments actually working. Was it just so exciting? Really good.
Yeah, there were so many things, like little moments which were amazing, like actually being able to drive from the cab, because originally you couldn't. You just drove from the outside with the flying camera. Yeah. So being able to get in the cab and operate and actually get hold of the controls and move them, that was actually quite a lot of work to make it do what it needed to do. And the and what getting the needles working, experimenting with cab lights and so forth, getting those kinds of working, Simulgraph being in the game and sort of seeing that powered, and then seeing Simulgraph develop, because things like I've shown in previous streams things like the Simulgraph graphing system, so that we can actually graph all the power outputs and so forth. Well, it was kind of round about this sort of time that some of that stuff was starting to appear in the back end as well. So there's really awesome stuff coming out of that. So,
yeah.
But one of those other milestones, which was really cool, was getting onto a Mark 1 coach. So at this point in time, like I said, when you walked around, you pressed a button to pop into the cab, which was only a small step from what we had in TS1, because TS1 you've got an external camera, so it's kind of like, yes, I can walk around and then I can magic myself into the cab, and that's kind of and the plan was always to get you into the cab properly, in quotes. Well, the there was this. What we did is we worked on the Mark 1 coach, and again, I'm going to remind you, this is the old TS1 Mark coach, and we cut it and bent it and twisted it to make it do what we wanted, and we made it to where you could interact with the coach and open the door and climb on, and that was one heck of a moment, because at that point, interacting with the vehicles and getting onto the vehicles is like, this was huge, and so roll VT.
Okay.
So this is, my glorious test route, and in fact, this is test route 2.
Okay. Let's watch
for which I'd figured out how to make spline platforms, and as you can see, we've got a Mark 1 coach here, and you can interact with the door and you can open it. Now, due to a fall, you had to jump to get on.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you just jump in?
because they weren't quite at the right level, and I tired of trying to relay that platform for the 15th time, so I just for the video jumped.
Jump in.
But yeah, so this is this is the getting into the cab. So again, you can see there's no texturing on the inside of this model or anything. It's the original. There is no interior being made for it. It is literally just yes, jump enabled. Trained by yes, the game did have jump back then. That's probably the bit everyone's excited to see.
Well, there was a jump. There used to be a jump feature, and now there isn't.
Yeah, the beta testers abused it, got themselves into all sorts of trouble, so I'm going to blame them entirely.
Sorry, I love the jump.
So so that was so this is inside of a Mark 1, and this was huge.
Yeah.
This was just the suddenly you could interact with vehicles, and you could open doors, you could get inside the vehicle. And one of my little party tricks when I was demoing this for people, because we didn't have any other way of doing it, was I'd set the train going. Sorry, I'd apply the brake on the 52.
Yeah.
I would apply the power because there was no traction lockouts at this point. Then I would release the brake, quickly run out of the train, run into the coach, by which point the brake had probably finished releasing and the train started moving, and I could say, yay, passenger view. And then moments later, run out of track. But it was, it was kind of epic to see this stuff. So it's... But yeah, so this video was captured that, which I was really, really pleased about.
It's actually awesome as well, like seeing this in such early days.
You notice how also everything is super shiny.
Yeah, it is just
everything is really, really shiny, and that was just because at this point there were no artists on the project, and so it was just fairly generic imports. Sorry. Ah. Hold on.
You're just floating. Much better.
Hello. Where's my train gone? Get back in the train. Troublemaker. Am I back in the cab yet?
Left a bit.
Oh, let me get XSplit up so I can see what I'm doing.
Priorities before we do anything.
Priorities. This'll do.
There we go.
This'll do. Bloomin' tunnels getting in the way. So yeah, that's where we got to with Mark 1s.
So yeah, did you celebrate every time you achieved a milestone, or was it just sort of like, right, we've done this one, on to the next one?
It was kind of more like, one done, move on. We've got so many things to figure out. No, there was an awful lot of these moments that it was that we were trying to solve, and there were a number of things like, so first person was a really key thing to get across, and so one of the things that was really important was to try and explain why that was important. Now, what I don't have, and I used to have a 30-minute video of a proof of concept I built in UE4 without any kind of train simulator, just so that I could try and explain to people what it meant to have a first-person train sim. So I built essentially a part of a route by copying some assets in, and then made it and set up all the collisions so you could walk over the bridge and see a train and walk into other buildings and sort of see what was going on, and I think it conveyed it quite well, and everyone's obviously familiar with it now because you can see it in the game as it stands. But at the time, this was forgot where I was going with that. But at the time, there was no experience of a first-person train simulator. So it's kind of like, why are we doing first-person? So it's kind of this, and that Mark 1 moment was one of those sort of contributing to that. This is why we're doing it. This is why it's different. That coach now feels big and different, and I can walk on that coach and experience what it's like to be on that Mark 1 coach. Isn't this going to be great when it's fully built as a dedicated actual TSW asset rather than being this, test asset that we've got running right now?
Yeah. Was there a moment where it all just sort of clicked together, or was it very much a case of it was just a gradual thing, and then before you knew it, you'd actually built something?
Well, there was a process everyone was following. We had a plan for where we wanted to get to, and then it was just, going through those tasks and getting these bits done. Inevitably, there were some bits that were missed and done towards the end, and then there was this process of optimization. And you also the amount of work it takes to go from a tech demo like these things to a finished releasable product. And I don't even mean taking into account making the route. I mean in terms of, making sure all the right dialogue boxes are there, making sure the settings work, making sure that it's got objectives properly in gameplay, and they've got the right tools for that. All sorts of, annoying little things.
Yeah.
Outside of, hey, isn't Semigraph great? Doesn't this train look cool? And actually turning a tech demo into a releasable game is an enormous amount of work. Was kind of one of the big lessons there. Was never underestimate that. That last 20% is 80% of the work.
Get everything done.
It is a bit. A bit. So there was another problem that we wanted to solve when we were going, when we were doing this, and I'm just going to tweak this a bit because it's got all messed up again. Hang on.
You're not happy with how you're floating, are you?
No, I'm not. It's just horrible.
Just ruining the illusion now, Matt.
It's just ruining the illusion completely. And
I think you need to be a little bit lower down. You can still see her body. There. Well,
how's that? That'll do. It's fine.
It's good enough.
It's less upsetting than it was before.
Yes, it is.
Looks like the train is going around super elevated curve, which is, darn it, it's not helpful.
Morgan's asked in the chat, when did you come up with the idea for collectibles?
That was fairly late on.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, what else can we come up with, for first person mode? That maybe people will or won't, want to do, and what can be optional.
Yeah.
Because one of the key things that we came up with for collectibles was it'd be great to have these sort of reasons to go to various points in the route. And how do we've kind of thinking sandpatch grade. We've kind of made this route with all this detail that you can walk around. Our biggest fear was no one would walk around it.
Yeah.
Having spent all the time doing that, so it's kind of like, what can we do? Can we put like visual points in that you go there and maybe it shows you a screenshot saying how great it is or something, this is how, what's this like? Because there's some other games, like Forza and a couple of other games that have got these I can't remember what they call them, moments or something like that, where you can sort of see areas. And so we thought, well, actually, if we made it a little bit more so that it felt like you were doing something, so that was when we came up with the idea of collectibles. And then the key thing with the collectibles was always to make it optional, so that the collectible should never complete the route, and having the collectible not completed should not break the route. Like, it should not be a big star flashing, that says "collect me" or anything daft like that.
I was going to say, have you found it quite challenging balancing the whole? It's a game that's also a casual simulator, because often, I assume you've had those decisions where it's like, do we make it more game style or do we make it more simulator style?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, we always continue to have that balancing discussion of, are we in some areas not hardcore enough, and in some areas, how are we so hardcore that actually only the really, really super elite are going to be able to play this stuff. And I still don't think we found the right balance. Just like this weekend, for example, and there are different arguments for different ways of doing it, but just looking at the casual audience playing the game at Alexandra Palace, and helping them along, it was really difficult for them.
Yes.
Really, really difficult for them, and it was really eye-opening to sort of get a fresh look at how players that haven't done the tutorials, I know that's all of you, don't lie, are and how they see the game and how they try and interact with the game. And some people got on with it really naturally, and other people didn't. It's just like, so there's a lot to learn from that. And others, that kind of thing is something that Sam is actually spending a lot of time looking into. But then from the other side of things is hard. Is the sim enough? And What's jarring with the sim enthusiast is also another valid question. And then it's trying to get those two worlds to match.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you make it all casual, it's too lightweight and there's not sticky enough. And if it's all too hardcore, then the number of people that will play it is tiny.
Yeah.
So we need to find a mix, and whether that's via just a choice that's compatible with both, or settings that that work round, that help people can choose their experience. It is that we need to sort of look at, and that's the constant balancing game. So I mean, at this point in with what we were doing here, it was very much again, we can do anything.
Yeah.
Ooh, maybe we shouldn't do everything, and where is that line? And again, we've adjusted and moved that line numerous times just since the launch of TSW, and no doubt we will continue to adjust it as we get feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. So, should we go on to the next video? And do you want to just chat a little bit about it before we show it?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things that we wanted to be able to do was to resolve a problem with, or a challenge that we had, difficulty we had on TS1, where making complex onboard computer screens, or even simple ones, frankly, was a really, really tough thing to do. It required an awful lot of artwork time to be able to do those screens. Because if you look at, so the most complex one I can recall in TS1 is the Class 68. And that's got really, I know the artists that worked on that went absolutely over the top, to be honest, and they implemented some really cool stuff in all the screens. It was really interesting, and it ended up, I think the model was so complicated, it actually got cut up into 2 or even 3 bits so that TrainSim could load it. It took significantly longer to make the model. And the amount of scripting that was required to actually make this stuff work was insane. So it's kind of like a yes, you can do it. No, we'll never do that again, because that was ridiculous.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, well, you know what? For a new train simulator, I don't want that to be ridiculous, and I do want all of those screens.
Yeah.
So now, fortunately, UE4 has this technology called UMG. I know I can't remember what it stands for. You can Google it. But UMG is the tech that you use for when you fire the game up and you've got like the menu options and the buttons and the settings and so forth. UMG is what creates that user interface. Well, you can put UMG user interfaces into the 3D world.
Okay.
And so the idea was, well, can we just make this a user interface designer's problem? Unreal Motion Graphics, thank you, Silater. Can we just make this a user interface designer's problem? Because then it becomes easy, frankly. And so we tried that. And so this next video is actually from a Dash 9. It's a old rail simulator Dash 9. And you can see sort of some of the really, really early prototype of getting the concepts ready and putting this interface into the cab of a train, making sure it will move with the train. Sounds like an obvious thing, but we need to it needs to be a thing. And making sure it update. Can it get data out of Simulgraph? Can we get it updated on the screen, and so forth? So so this is what this video shows. Is
Are we still in 2015 in this video as well?
Yep.
Still in 2015.
Yeah. Again, you're going to see. So where I showed in the Mark 1 first person, I said this was the test route 2. This essentially is another bit of test route 2.
Okay.
So this is that Dash 9. So multi-camera positions working. Look at this, and then you can see this UMG. Now again, it's not actually really driving the screen. The screen is an image. But you can see some live bits on there with the RPM count and the speedo needle, multiple screens as well, which was something we hadn't done before on this, and getting them showing different information, putting the time on there, and just it was this kind of information was just very, very good to see finally, sort of. And once we got that level of information working, what it meant was then it's like say, oh, hang on, it's just UMG. Oh, in that case, it's dead easy. At that point, I say dead easy. Peter's going to shoot me on.
I know, right? It's
Yeah.
dead easy. Yeah, sure it was. You weren't the one doing it.
Compared to the Class 68 in TS1, it was absolutely this was significantly easier. And the minute it becomes a UMG, UMG is designed to do UI. It sort of solves that problem, and that's the foundation. What you're seeing here is effectively the very first of any kind of onboard computer system, and it's the foundation of everything that's come since.
Awesome.
Oh, look at my magnificent junction motors that I put in there as well. Those big arrows. You walked over to those and clicked on them, and they spun over to change the junctions. I was so proud of those.
I'm sure you were. I could just imagine all of these different milestones where you just sat there looking chuffed with yourself because you've achieved something. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, really. So yeah, it was really good. So we got the new the ability to make, whatever we wanted in the way of screens, interactive touch panels, all sorts of things, which was was exactly what we hoped we'd be able to do. And it kind of, again, that was another tick box to say, right, our in-cab systems can be much more comprehensive without having to book in 3 times as much art resource to make a train. So brilliant.
David Park said, Matt, I love your enthusiasm and passion for TSW. I mean,
thank you.
This tonight, I think, is really highlighting that as well, because obviously this is years in the making. And you're still, I think, you'll probably sound as enthusiastic now as I imagine you did 5 years ago. And
5 years from now, it's it's been a real privilege to watch this develop. And just in case anybody is walking away with the wrong idea, I'm not claiming any development for this. The whole team have been working on this, and I've just basically had the joy of seeing it and guide them and come up with ideas that mostly annoyed them because they made life really difficult sometimes. But no, the team have worked so hard on this stuff and developed and enhanced and extended it. And what you're seeing here are kind of like the really earliest videos of what this looked like. And if you go back to look at early videos of Sandpatch Grade on YouTube, and you can just start pacing through where things are, you just realise just how far this thing has come. Which is just brilliant watching it go from nothing. Starting, almost to the point of file new project, to where we are now, and
I'm really grateful you've actually got these videos as well, because it's really nice for me seeing how it's developed. Like, obviously, I've come into the project and working in the company really far down in the development, and it's nice to see where it's come from.
Yes. Yeah, it is. I mean, like I said, I have potentially got other videos and screenshots we can look at in the future if I can find them.
Yes.
Because they're buried away in various places. So if we can, maybe we'll do another update later on with some more stuff. But but no, given the 5-year anniversary, and I had these ones tucked away, I thought this was an interesting thing to look at.
Absolutely.
Ed, I do have all of the videos, but I'm not showing all of them tonight.
No, it's fair enough. Now, as we're on the topic of videos, let's go straight into the next one, shall we?
Yeah. So I think this is the last of the video. Oh no, it's not the last of the videos. Nearly the last of the videos. So this one actually is. This one is nothing particularly special. But what it is it's just like the the Dash 9s hauling a bunch of the coal cars. Going around a corner, and it was more just a case of starting to sort of see American freight, because at this point we kind of decided the route.
Yep.
And so that's why CSX starts appearing on the trains in the demos, and the theme starts to move to that away from the 52, and we start looking at this stuff. And kind of this was just cool for me because it was quite a longish train, and it was kind of the first time we'd seen that sort of more than a loco and a few Mark 1s, for example, and just having a bit of a run by. So if you want to go and fire the video.
Let's.
So again, we're on test route 2, Again, this is all old content. I actually thought these were the new Bethgons, but I looked at them again closer in the video, and these are the original ones. So these are not new assets. So this is the old Road Simulator -9, and rolling along with its shiny fuel box.
That's very shiny.
It is a bit. I blame oil leak personally, but yeah, as you can see, and it's got this nice long train behind it of the cars. So it was cool. It was great to see. The springs, you can see the wagons bouncing furiously around there because the track and the spring settings were all set, to 100%. So they were bouncing around a lot, so we could see it. But I handmade all that terrain as well. I was just literally sitting there with a landscape tool going mad with it. It was, yeah, I know. This is my contribution to TSW is wobbly landscape.
The environment team would be so proud.
The environment team would be a little bit less happy than that. So yeah, these it was good to see. So that was quite good. I mean, this route had quite a lot of junctions on it and a bit more complexity than Test Route 1, because when we did Test Route 1, they couldn't do junctions in the game. You notice they're not even rendering properly at this point.
Yeah.
So this was just before the rendering stuff while the rendering stuff was going in, because actually the rendering of the track actually was probably one of the biggest components in the entire game, is how the track is rendered, because there's so many rules and complexities in different types and styles, so many different types of junction, and they all have to be catered for so that all the sleepers line up, or they have different sleepers, and all this stuff is done differently. So it ended up being a massive project getting all of the track rendering in for that stuff. But it's a really neat system because as well as just having that you can specify the rail profile, and then you say how far apart the rail is, and then you give it a list of as many sleepers as you like, and then you say and it'll pick randomly from that list of sleepers, and then you can add little a diagonal adjustment randomization to them. So if you're creating a really rickety old railway, you can actually have like a bunch of different weathered sleepers, and you can have them wobbling around a bit, versus a modern high-speed one with all in alignment. So that's really cool.
That is cool. That is cool. Now, as we're on the topic of Sandpatch, should we go on to the images, the comparison?
So so one of the things, so again, related to timescales and so forth, one of the questions is, what is the sort of the timeline for TS1, and what did it look like? So it was around June 2015 that Sandpatch Grade was actually proposed as being the launch route for TSW, and then in September 2015, that's when the environment team leads, I think there were 3 of them, completed what they were doing on TS1 and formally started building on TSW, and they started building Sandpatch Grade. And cool. That kind of built, what that starts with is one of them in particular. Bearing in mind, these are really experienced TS1 developers who've been doing this for years, and they're coming into this new graphics engine of UE4, and we're also at this point also throwing a route that they've never made before as well. So what we did actually was we got them to produce Sandpatch Grade, just a small tile of it, so don't get excited, again these are not precursors to anything happening. We got them to produce Sandpatch Grade in TS1, and just like a mile of it, and that's about it, not much more than you'll see in this screenshot. And then the idea was to do the same screenshot in TS World, and show as a point of comparison, because it also meant that the team could use the tools they're super familiar with to develop the route and understand what they would need to develop the route, and then effectively redevelop that in TS World so that they could use that and then learn the new tools and just focus on learning the new tools. And it turned out to be a really good approach. They learned a ton doing it, and it was quicker to do it. yes, it was good. So I don't know if you want to show the screenshots. So these screenshots. So this is the TS1 version of Sandpatch Grade, and this is the TS World version of Sandpatch Grade. So these screenshots were taken side by side essentially. And the other thing it did was really highlight the difference between TS1 and TS World at the time as well, because we had no comparison with anything that existed in TS1.
Yeah.
And so it was really good. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will be saying, U36B in CSX? Ooh. And I'm going to go back to my earlier warning or disclaimer, about don't get excited.
Yes, this is not let's speculate whether or not this is going to be happening. It's not happening.
So the U36B was actually something we introduced as a sort of like having done the Dash 9 as the first American train, which was still a walk up to it, press a button, and you pop into the cab. With the U36B, because that was a much more recent model done to a much higher quality standard, we were able to build something more akin to a TS World loco out of that U36B, and actually be able to separate all the doors out, make ladders work. And so the U36B was the first loco where we experienced that from the track, climb up into the loco, open the doors, and again sit down in the seat. That sort of transition. So that was the U36B we did that on. And then the loco right in front of us that you can see there is the GP38-2 that you're all driving today. That's obviously not that one, but no. The one that you'll see, that was actually a genset, because it was the closest thing I had to a GP36 and GP38 in Sandpatch, in CSX livery. But yeah, this one here, the one you can see in the TSW shot there, actually is the sort of the first instance of the GP38. Once the rail vehicle artists started moving across onto there as well. So it was this was a really iconic, really amazing shot to see where we were headed with TSW.
That is ace.
So someone asked earlier on about TS2 prototype versus TS World, and what's going on there. And originally, it was going to be one of the internal working title for it for quite a while was Train Sim 2. But the more we worked on it, the more we realised it's not really a Train Sim 2. This is kind of different. And so rather than calling it Train Sim 2, which is almost belittling on Train Sim 1, we opted to name it something entirely different. And that's where TS World came in. The world doesn't refer to the globy thing that we're standing on or the flat thing we're standing on, depending on your beliefs. What it does is it refers to all of the things you can do, the world of trains, essentially. So the fact that you can get out and walk around and be in the coaches and doing the loading and unload of wagons and interacting with all sorts of things, it's that world that TS World refers to, and that was kind of where we settled on TS World, or Train Sim World, as being the title for it, which is, I've always felt, sounded really good and much better than potentially where we got to before. But unfortunately, the project title in Unreal, when they clicked file new project, was TS2 prototype. And when we emailed Epic Games and said, so how easy is it to rename a project, they said, don't.
Oh no! So you got stuck with TS2 prototype.
So this is why when you go into the executables, you'll find it is the Train Sim World executable is TS2 prototype.exe.
No way.
Lesson learned.
Oh, that's so disappointing. Oh.
So yeah, there's all sorts of it's, but hey, this is how it is, and this is not even unique to here. This is a standard dev thing. The number of projects I started in previous roles where I'd start them as like, oh, this will be a proof of concept for this, and then the proof of concept develops and suddenly is the thing that gets released, because it's where all the work's gone into, and it's still called proof of concept internally. It's not a proof of concept anymore, but you can't change the name because it's all over everywhere. So it's it's quite a challenge, but it's fine. it's not the end of the world. I think we actually renamed some of the things part of Train Sim World 2 to where they now show up as Train Sim World rather than TS2 Prototype, but it is still there if you look.
At least now they know why.
But yeah, exactly. That's the history behind that.
So Crazy Killer's asked if there was anything you'd still like to do in the future with a first-person perspective, what would it be? Now, I cannot stress enough that when you answer this, this is a hypothetical. If you could have 3 wishes from a genie to get what you want, it's not actually being done. But what would you want if you could?
I want to explore more of the world outside of the train. I think we've made the train as explorable as it possibly can be, with the exception of engine rooms and the like. And the challenge with that is the engine rooms, which we did in some of the earlier content, turns out to add another sort of 30-40% to the dev cost of a train that very few people even go into. And actually, it's already a lot more resource intensive to make trains than it was in TS1, and what this does is makes it a lot harder, which means you get less trains. Bluntly, so by not making the engine room, we sort of make it to where actually we can put more stock in the pack, or we can put more than there would have been. I know, if there's some people are thinking, well, actually, there's not a lot in the pack. Well, it would have been less had we made more and more engine rooms, and it didn't feel worth it. So I think overall, we've got the train, at the right level of explorability. And coaches and all that stuff, and I love that. But actually, I want to go out and explore the world just a little bit more. And actually, one of the things I was really pleased was when Lucas and Ed did the Meissen branch, and just how much of that you can walk around on foot. And you can walk around and cross the bridge and go up onto the little nook on the hillside, so you can then do the little bit of rail fanning. That's perfect. That's the kind of thing I'd love to see more of.
You want to give everybody the opportunity to rail fan a bit more.
I want to. It's about, again, harking back to the train sim world. It's about, as a rail fan, as a train enthusiast, it's not just driving trains. Yeah, that's the majority of why I play the game. I just love being around trains.
Yeah.
So I want to see no toilets, no baked bean kit. They're banned. They're illegal. So I want to be around trains, and I want to see trains moving around. I want to make believe I am train spotting these areas. Potentially, in the upcoming Steam route, you'll be able to rail fan. It's something that hasn't existed for 70 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Which is amazing. But by the same token, I can rail fan places I'm probably unlikely to ever get to. Even no matter what time frame they're going to be. So it's all this stuff, and you can do the rail fanning to some extent. But it's kind of like, I must admit, and this isn't, like I said, this isn't me trying to push this isn't something necessarily going to become a priority. But it's just like, this is one of the things that I like to see, and I try and look around in most routes. I try and do that. When we had the first versions of Sandpatch Grade working, next to me for build testing, I actually had a big TV on a table next to me, facing out kind of into the rest of the office, and I had a PC running on that, just like I said, for doing build testing, so that I could see what it was like on a telly. And when no one was using it, I just used to leave it sat near a level crossing on Sandpatch Grade, and it would just sit there, birds twittering in the background, leaves blowing in the wind, and then every now and again you'd hear this train go thundering by. And what was really cool was how many people in the office would stop what they were doing and come and look at it, watch the train go by.
Oh, that's cool.
And then they go back to what they were doing. It's
that is really cool.
Fans.
No, I love that.
That was really cool. So I really like that sort of thing. So and it's and I've done that a couple of times since. And but that was what it actually reflects. Actually, is I think less about them being necessarily rail fans, because I doubt they are, but not all of them certainly. But actually more just that. Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, no, it's that.
Look at our game doing that.
Cool.
Look at our game doing that. Doesn't that look amazing? Doesn't that sound amazing? And it was. It was good. Ed, no, I'm still looking to see if I can recover that that video, but at the that's the 30-minute one I mentioned before, and at the moment that one is missing.
I mean, I think after this you're going to end up doing a deep dive for some of your older videos. I can see that happening.
I love looking at what's happened in the past. It's so easy to forget what's gone
Yeah.
in the past, and take for granted what there is today, and forget what there is in the past. You could do the same thing with TS1. Go back to Railworks when it first launched. Go and watch some videos if you can find them of Railworks, and now look at Train Simulator 2022.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say, oh, but Train Sim is just Railworks. No, it really isn't. It's advanced in so many ways since then, particularly with the Train Sim 2012 release. So it's good to reflect on just how far things have come across, which is why we're here today.
Exactly. Now, shall we show the last video, which is TS1 and TS2?
Yeah, so this video was put together as sort of like a summary of where things are at, and by this point we're around TS 2016, and this will also, as well as showing some TS 2016 stuff, which is, it's just awesome. I love TS1 to death. But what it does show you is some more clips from what TS World was looking like, actually from a while before this. These were older clips that I brought into this video at the time. And so you can see effectively that screenshot we showed of TS World Sandpatch grade. This is kind of it being used then, so you can kind of see that screenshot live effectively. And this is, if I remember rightly, this has also got where you can see climbing onto the U-boat as well, which is pretty neat.
This video was actually never intended for the public, really, was it? This was just something you were showing internally.
This is something I cut together for internal purposes. So it's kind of got the feel of a very badly put together official video. It is not an official video, something that I put together for internal purposes. So what I don't want is anyone to start thinking our creative team any less about creative, because they would do a much better job if they did this. This was something that I put together, and it got the message across. People could sort of see the comparison between the two, and also get a really cool idea of some of the stuff that was possible and coming with Train Sim World. So, but yes,
play it.
Let's take a look. So a bit of London Faversham to start with. So this is TS 2014 content.
Yeah.
Love that route so much. I mean, I was so happy when we were able to make it in TS World as well. This is the East Coast Main Line. Again, we're still in TS1.
Yep.
No, I'm not foreshadowing, just before anyone says. And then obviously Steam, and my favourite Steam loco. In this case, this is the A4 Packard doing one of the London Brighton Preserve runs. So here we are with Train Simulator, and here we go with the U-boat, the GP38 rolling on by. Early days stuff, remember. This is interacting with the door, opening it, climbing in. This is really early days of seeing this first-person experience. Bumping with the auto racks, the couplers. This is the auto rack, was only just imported then. And here somehow I'd managed to sneak into a train in the back of the consist while I was trying. This was probably another one of those where I did the brakes trick, and at this point this train is running free. So this is the GP30. So this is, again, we just got rain starting to come into the game as well. So it's there was some really cool stuff in there, and what I liked about that were given the clips that I couldn't find. I think that one little video there kind of had some of the essence in there of but I particularly liked that bit with the U-boat where we climb in and go through the door, because much like the Mark 1, that was a moment that was kind of like oh wow, I can go from the ground and climb into this train the way I'm supposed to. I mean, the next one after that would have been when we did it in the AC 4400 when that model came in, and we were able to see climbing up on opening that big door in the nose and walking through the nose and getting into the cab, and it's just these moments are were just really awesome. It's
amazing, and it's like you say, it's things these days that probably we don't even consider to be a milestone. It's just sort of you climb aboard and that's it. But back then, it's huge.
That's the thing, isn't it? Though everything that's great today
Yeah.
or everything that's normal today was great when it first happened.
Yeah.
There are all of these things that were firsts in this, and these are some of the moments when they were sort of like they were really, really first times they were in the game. So it's really cool. It's really cool to see.
Does it make you quite
Gorgatron
like
says,
nostalgic thinking about it all, about back
"Oh, it
then and
does
how
because
it is now?
it sends me back into sort of the time, towards all of these early challenges and very different pace and style of development compared to where we're at now, and it's kind of got that frontier explorer type feel to it back then, because we were just doing sort of like, what's the way we're going to make it to where how will you interact with the door?
Yeah.
What will the tooltip look like, and how will you do it? Will you have to like mouse over the handle, move the handle down, and then somehow mouse over the door to open? How are we going to do this stuff? And it was trying out all sorts of different things, and it was just such, so many different prototypes and exploration. I mean, there were early VR prototypes as well, and because I got a bit of a reputation for having quite a strong constitution when it comes to VR, because the early VR stuff was not the greatest in terms of nausea. I don't mean TSW, I just mean generally because of bad frame rates, and the VR world, there's a lot we know that we didn't know then. And one of the engineers made this spiral. They didn't tell me any of this stuff. He basically made this test, and then asked me to come over and try this, put the headset on me, and then started it. And it was a 52 going round a tight spiral loop, and the camera was outside the train, also spinning.
No, that's just mean.
And I was fine.
It was a good job.
I was fine.
Was he trying to torture you?
They were just basically all looking at me, sort of marveling, going, "Oh, I'll give up then." But there was all sorts of weird and wacky things that we tried to try and work out what that's going to, how these things are going to work, and it was great fun. It was great fun.
You have just mentioned something which I'm sure you can imagine has everybody wondering, oh my gosh, when's it coming to Train Sim World 2? You mentioned VR. Mm-hmm. Are there any plans at the moment to add VR?
No, there's been lots of discussions. I've got designs that I've written for it, and it's TSW is perfectly suited for VR, but what's needed is enough of a market, enough of a player base that use VR and interested in trains to actually justify the work, because you can't just use in Unreal. There is a command stereo space on, which basically switches you into VR mode, and if you're already in the game in a dev build and you can type that command in, then which won't work, by the way, for those of you who are trying it, because the VR stuff is deintegrated now. But when you could type that command in, you would then appear in VR. It'd be great, but the HUD didn't work, objectives didn't work, walking didn't work. It was just a sea of things that mean that actually this is a long way from shippable.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is think about, rather than just make a bad VR port, actually the game needs to be thinking about VR at a more fundamental level. I think I know for a fact that if VR ever does become a thing, you're going to be one of the first people signing up to that. Oh yeah, you love it. I'm a huge fan of VR. Yeah. I'm trying to but it's got to be done at the right time. It's got to be done when there's if 90% of the audience are looking for feature A, and VR is what 1% of the audience want, it is not right to work on that feature. And that's the purpose of Sam's polls. Yes. When he puts his surveys out, is to find out what you want. And VR is always at the bottom of that list. And we always know what's at the top. So it's when the time is right, I would love to see VR, but it's not on any cards at the minute, because you don't want it, frankly. Now, continuing with a bit of the old nostalgia and what it used to look like. So we've shown all the videos, and we've shown a comparison between the Sampatch grade images, but we actually have one more
one more image to share, don't we? And that's it.
I have been hunting around for an example of this, and this is more just for the point of a bit of amusement than anything else. That because as many people know, my favourite colour is pink.
Is
and
it?
No, okay. Sorry, Nat isn't aware of that, folks.
I had no idea.
It's a surprise. But the early prototypes of TS World, including in actual game versions of it, obviously these never made it out. These were early versions. The UI was all pink. And it wasn't actually because of something I instigated. The UI designer, our head UI designer at the time, also really loved pink. So if you want to pop up the screenshot, this is one of the UI demo examples.
I mean, this sounds a bit like the time the loco models are in pink, and you're like, yeah, no, I had nothing to do with that. It's like, sure.
No, it wasn't, but I did encourage. So this was, an example of the early. I don't know if you can remember the old Train Sim World user interface and how that used to look, which is kind of along these lines. This was the early prototype for the service mode screen, but you can see the colours on there, and this is for a fleeting moment it looked like it was going to be in that, but there was a fairly universal from various important people saying, obviously that's a test color, when is the real one going in?
Yeah.
Which is where blue came from, which everyone found more appealing. So but I liked that color, so I thought that was really nice. But
so what is going on in this image?
So this is the service mode screen. So this is you've got where it's got the various things in, like the digital font over there on the underneath destination. That's where you'd have the list of services in there,
also,
with the description of it, and you've got the time of day, month, year, all that stuff going on there. This is really early prototype.
The Welsh one at the top right. That's not a typo. That's actually a town in Wales.
It is.
I'm not saying
No,
it.
I'm not saying it.
I'm not saying it. I can say it, but I'm not.
This was actually a localization proof of concept, because we wanted to see whether or not the font they'd picked for this could support different languages. So they'd taken one of the existing screens and put all different languages in there to see what it would look like.
Yeah. So yeah, it looks very different now.
Oh yeah, it looks very different. It looks not too far away from what was launched, other than obviously the colour. But obviously the UI's gone through at least a couple of fairly heavy rebuilds since this point.
So yeah, it's very different now. I mean, you say it's pink. I mean, to me, it's a very dark shade of pink, but
it's a pinky red.
Pink.
But it was enough. It was enough pink to
it was enough pink to make you happy.
Yeah, it was cool. It was more pink than I thought I was ever going to get away with, and I didn't get away with it. So, it was. I know. I from here I did say, well, can we have a color picker so that I can have pink and whatever you want? And no. So we ended up with blue. Which I quite liked as well, to be fair. So it was, but yes, that was Liam, the user interface designer who designed the original user interface for TSW. He was a huge fan of pink as well. His logos, his own artwork that he does is all in pink as well. So it's kind of reminiscent of that.
Excellent. And then I guess for the towards the end of this stream, what we're going to talk about now is obviously Train Sim World 2 now. And I've grabbed a bunch of screenshots from all of our routes, or some of our, well, I don't think all of them, but a lot of our routes. And you're going to talk to us about what milestones we achieved in each of these. And hopefully the screenshots will help to show some of that off, or highlight exactly what we're talking about.
Just talking about some of the stuff, because one of the things I wanted to get across with this was, at the point that we released Sandpatch Grade, we basically released a Sandpatch Grade simulator. Yeah, which sounds slightly odd, but it couldn't do all sorts of things that you could do in TS1, for example. Like, there were no such concepts as passengers. Yeah, there was no such concept as an electric locomotive. As it transpired, the diesel electric simulation was completely wrong. And so what was launched in the original Sandpatch Grade was a husk, sort of like a nucleus of what there actually is in there now. And actually, every single release barring very few exceptions, has grown that nucleus
Yeah.
to allow it to actually expand the game. It's not just been a new route, it's been a new route and a bunch of new features in the game. Even if sometimes those features haven't been really obvious, they've been like, well, now you can have passengers.
Yeah, so
So
should we go straight into the
let's go
pictures
to
and
the
we can
first
talk
one.
about them? So let's go into the first one. So we've changed places. You're up there on the left and I'm on the right.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Great Western. So Great Western was route number 2.
Yeah.
And this route, we needed a number of things differently on this one. So first and the biggest is passengers and timetable stops. And all the things that you need on a timetabled service that you don't on a US freight service. Then you've got the HST there, which has coaches you can walk into and sit down on the seats for. Now, in the Mark 1 prototype, we showed how you'd set up a Mark 1 that could let you walk into it. Well, this GWE was the next time we touched any of that stuff because you barely needed it on Sandpatch grade, other than we made the boxcar so you could climb into the boxcar. So the HST had to have all the seats that you could sit down on. And the physics for HST, particularly the braking systems, we've now got British braking systems, not American braking systems, which are quite different. It's a distributor valve versus the triple valve. And the way that HST works actually is a combination of that sort of an air system and electro-pneumatic. Because the two power cars electronically talk to each other, and so they brake up and down at the same levels while the coaches follow with air. So this is quite different, quite complicated, change in the way brakes work. So you can't just say we did brakes in Sandpatch grade. Well, we did brakes again for Great Western, more and different brakes. Now we had the diesel hydraulic simulation from the Class 52, and we had and that kind of informed the basis of the Class 166, which is also a diesel hydraulic. But again, there was more work done there because what we'd done in the 52 prototype was prototype, put simply. Whereas, what we needed to do was to actually productize that and then make it better, make it more capable. So many things were added to the core game to make Great Western. It almost was a completely second major upgrade to the content in this, and we actually came back numerous times to GWE, but I'll cover that in one of the later updates. This was GWE and where we got to it. So many different things added, all surrounding making passengers work and the requirements for the trains. For the Class 66 was used a lot of similar stuff to the American train because fundamentally they're similar to an SD40. But it had one of the first screens other than the AC4400 because it had the EM2000 display, so you could do various things with a little computer screen on the top cap. So there was all sorts of cool things that were in there. So that wasn't just features that were added to there. This is all core stuff that gets added to make that core nucleus bigger every time.
Now, for anybody wondering, just to clarify, these pictures we are showing, these are all images that I've taken myself over the past week, just to reference for this stream. So you could theoretically go and recreate the pictures yourself if you wanted. But yeah, I took them all myself over this week. So should we go to the next one?
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
Which is where we touch on rapid transit, I believe.
So rapid transit was route 3.
Yeah.
So this is, like I said, this is the pattern where you're going to see that most routes brought something big in. So for route 3, for rapid transit, we've now got overhead electric powered trains.
Yeah.
And we've got German, the first instance of the German signalling system. I think this was the KS signalling system.
Yeah.
And the first instance of PZB in cab signalling, and probably at the time the most complex, or some of the more complex use of the UMG panels for the in-cab screens that we'd done at that point. The AC4400 was relatively simplistic at the time. This needed to be a step up to be a bit more advanced, and kind of the team got more experience with using UMG for that stuff. And this was using passenger trains, passenger timetables, but then I'm just looking at the screenshots you've included, and actually,
Do you want to
this
see
is
the
what I
other
should
ones?
have asked
So
for.
yeah, we've got the ones
This is
showing
the
off the pantograph.
This is the pantograph,
Yeah.
and actually, what I missed asking you to do a screenshot of was the underground stations.
Yeah, I think you asked me, but I was struggling to get any pictures.
So the underground stations of rapid transit ended up being a massive pain because in the initial versions of it, the frame rate inside the underground stations was awful.
Yeah.
Because it's undercover, and so we had lots of lights in there to sort of bring it up and to make it start to look a bit good. But then it also didn't look great because you had shadows in odd places. So then extra lights were added to make the shadows go away, and all this kind of stuff. And it was all dynamic lighting. So it actually looked really, really terrible. And sorry, the looked okay, but the frame rate was really terrible when you went down there. And so this is.
Oh, Matt.
Dear, oh dear. Let me just fix my XSplit to do something a bit. Let's go with that. Yeah, that'll do. And I'm going to get rid of the game. Right.
That's better. That's less distracting. Hold on. Let me help with this as well.
So this is where we introduced, or we started learning how to do something in Unreal called light baking. And the idea of light baking is that you put all of the lights in that you want to, and you can go absolutely crazy with them if you want to. And then for those of you that know of the phrase ray tracing, what effectively it does is it will render those lights in that scene against all of the textures and save them. And then you go in and you turn all those lights off.
Yeah.
And the end result is what you see in rapid transit today, where when you drive through it, the frame rate is fantastic because there's no lights in there, or very few lights in there. There's a little bit there to support the train, but actually there's no light, really very few lights in there at all. And yet it looks spectacular with the way that it's been lit and so forth. And that's done using this light baking system. Now that light baking system, we then went back to Great Western, and we light baked Paddington, which had frame rate issues because of all the lights used in the roof, and Reading. So we went back to Great Western and reapplied the light baking system to that, which made them look considerably better than they used to, and raised the frame rates quite substantially as well. So there's all sorts of really cool stuff that was done in that.
We've actually got some of the chat reminiscing as well at the moment as well. So Cameron Young has said, I remember we were really impressed by the moving pantograph because it was something not seen in Train Sim 1.
So actually that's not strictly true, although this was a much more technically I don't want to use the word sensible. I'm not sure what word to use because I don't want to do is belittle what Alan Thompson achieved in TS1 because he had the first moving pantograph in TS1.
Okay.
But it was the way it worked was very, very hard coded. Essentially, it would look at the stuff down the track and send messages to the train telling it how high to lower its pantograph. But it worked superbly well and it did the job. And it was kind of like when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, that's how it should work, but not like that.
Yep.
That required lots of extra setup. And if you want it in the route, I kind of want it to be dynamic. I just want it to find the wire and stop and go up and down with the wire, and so the team, and it turns out that's quite easy to do in Unreal because it can just, the technique here is it's called firing array, and this will basically just effectively fire a line up until it finds the wire, and then it will wind the animation of the pantograph to that point. So as the wire goes up and down, so it can wind the animation forwards and backwards, essentially. And so that was really cool. But yes, that worked really, really well. But no, I don't want to take credit for the first one. Alan was the first one to do that in TS1. Maybe others, but Alan was the first one certainly I was aware of. And then Ed has said, actually, that it was the first time AC motors.
Yes.
Because actually our AC 4400 was built as a DC loco, because that's all we had at the time. And we didn't have AC motors, and even the DC motors didn't work very well. So this was our first shot at the AC motor system for the electrics. And then the other thing was that in timetabling, so we talk about timetables and the work that Joe does on timetables and so forth quite a lot in newer stuff. We had... So to make timetables in Sandpatch grade, because I did the timetable on Sandpatch grade, when we make a timetable and you put all the services down, you then have to do this thing called simulating the timetable, which runs it through its entirety of its 24 hours, saving the locations of the trains throughout every minute of the day, so that when you jump into the world at 10:43, it knows exactly where all those trains are and just gets on with it. So you have to do that. The other benefit of simulating it is that you can see if it works, see if all the trains get to where they're going to go, because it effectively plays that timetable out throughout the day. So in Sandpatch Grade, simulating a 24-hour timetable literally took 24 hours. Yeah, it was a one-to-one thing. It
literally took 24 hours.
So fix a bug, wait 24 hours to see if it still worked, or raise 3 new problems. It was incredibly slow, and that's why the original launch of Sandpatch Grade had one shunting service.
Okay.
Because it took me so long to get that working. It was 3 weeks, 4 weeks of solid work to get that one thing working, because it was a day here, a day here, a day here. It was terrible. Now they managed to get that down to 12 hours by the end of Sandpatch Grade, which is awesome. It's doubling it. It's saving me 12 hours. Still terrible. Yeah, really, really terrible. In Great Western, we were down to 8 or 9 hours. And that's a much more complicated timetable. Adam actually built the foundations of that. Adam Lucas built the foundation of that timetable, and then I think I spent, after he built the foundation, which is all of the services and programmed everything with where it was going and all the HSTs and the 166s, he did a fabulous job with that. I think it then took me another 9 weeks just to make it work, because of taking 12 hours per iteration trying to make this thing. And we have this thing, a compiler now, which tells us where lots of things don't make sense. If you make a train up and it's not got the order instructions in the right order, it's an easy mistake to make. The compiler will now say, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
We didn't have that back then. So the only way you knew something was wrong was to sim it for 9 hours. And then it would come back and say, oh yeah, that's not going to work.
That's like torture.
It was the love of service mode, and the bits we'd seen of it working in Great Western, sort of when it did work, it's just like that spurred you on to see more and more and more of it.
Yeah.
So,
Mod Derek just said that just sounds like pain. Yeah, it does. That just sounds so unpleasant.
It was terrible, but the benefit was really clear. What this was like, it was worth the effort to get this stuff working, because you could see how good it was going to be. And again, Adam did the foundations of the rapid transit timetable, and I did the same thing again. It was kind of like, because I'd kind of got used to how to go through all of this was literally run a simulation, and then at the end of it, all you had was a log. It's just a big 100-200 megabyte text file of garbage spewed out by the game of, these are all of the logging that the game has sent out. And I used to sit there with sheets and sheets of paper trying to work out, right, this train clearly has stopped moving. Why? Oh, it stopped moving. And then just trace my way through. It stopped moving because that train. Okay, but that train stopped moving because of that train. And work out the chain of trains. It's like, this is the one that's actually stopped moving. And that would take hours of backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, finally. Oh, that's because I've said that on the wrong track. All right, fix the track up.
We've had Ed saying in the chat, you didn't have a preview of what the simulation actually was back then as well, from what he recalls. So detecting wrong routes, for example, was impossible.
Yeah, now, exactly. So now, and this sort of came in around rapid transit sort of time. We had the ability to, we started to get the ability to do early compilation of a timetable. So early fault finding was instant.
Yeah.
There was no need to simulate it. The obvious stuff you'd asked it to do, like, I can't find a route from A to B. Okay, that's great. Thanks. I'll go and fix that now. I haven't had to wait 9 hours to tell me you can't do something instantly.
Yeah.
And then also it could start drawing that path on the map for me, so I could see, oh look, you're going down the wrong way. So in Great Western, you noticed that, and a lot of players noticed the 166 being routed onto the high speed lines and then back on it off again, because it was literally the shortest path around a curve. It was effectively cutting the top off the curve, and going across. I couldn't see any of that back then because the tools didn't show it. Whereas sort of starting around rapid transit and on, it starts to become easier to see what's going on. I mean, much later on, we actually even have a preview system now, so that I can actually view the simulation output data in real time. I can just use a slider and wipe it backwards and forwards and see where all the trains are. So simulation has come on so much.
Yeah, Train Simulator Driver said it's cool that the tools progress too, because this means that multiple routes per year instead of one every year or two, because now it's not taking you 9 weeks and wishing that you were dead.
Yeah. it was I mean that was just awful, and I basically went to the team after the engineering team after Great Western and said, I need an option at this.
Yeah,
please,
can't do
I
this
need
anymore.
something. And full credit to them, as always, they started looking at it, and it was I mean, Ed just said it was Bakerloo was like that. I mean, LIRR was like that. There've been so many that have. What's happened is each route has introduced so many new challenges as well as brought new things in. But we'll get to those when we get to those. So
yeah, should we go on to the next images?
Yep.
So the next one's RSN.
So RSN brought cruise control.
Yeah.
We didn't really have cruise control before. There was slow speed control in the AC 4400, but this was actual cruise control, a much more solid implementation using with AFB. And we had more interactions going on. So we actually had the engine room or the side rooms on this one. So you could walk down the corridor to the side of the 143. And in addition to the 143, you had the cab car. Yep. So we had effectively remote controlled trains with this as well. Mm-hmm. So that was an interesting challenge.
Do you want me to keep going through the next ones?
The timetable on this one wasn't too bad, actually. No? It wasn't too bad, and it implemented a lot of other stuff. What about NEC? I think we skip NEC.
We do. We actually talked about this. Me and you actually talked about this when we were talking about getting all of these screenshots together, and obviously it's quite a big. We knew that everybody was going to ask about the NEC. And you said that, there were areas of that went really well and areas that didn't.
So NEC, there was different ways of making some parts of the route. It was where one of the things that a lot of people asked about on GWE was, where's ATP? Where's the cab signalling system? And we didn't have the wherewithal to make that at that point in time. Whereas the implementation of access in here was in the NEC route was essentially sort of the foundations for potentially going back and looking at ATP at some point in the future, which we still haven't got to. Yeah. But good job, because that wouldn't have been the right way to do it. We've got much better systems that are in there these days, and so it's LZB really was kind of built as a next iteration on that as well. So it's lots of iterations on that stuff, but fundamentally, other than some misfires in terms of how we make routes, I'm not sure that NEC introduced much.
Yep.
Other than that stuff around access, which was really cool and worked really, it was really interesting. But actually, in and of itself, it tripped itself up more than anything else.
Should we head over to the next screenshot?
Yep.
So obviously, Northern Trans Pennine.
Actually, Ed makes a good point there. Actually, another interesting thing we did with RSN was previously when we had a dual cab loco, it literally was fully modelled with everything in both. They're all dual set up and everything else. Mm-hmm. Now we actually find out all the common areas of it, and it's done once, and then it's put in twice essentially from that doing it once. So now we only have to set up one cab rather than two, which makes it a lot more efficient to set up, as well as using less memory. But it still means we can do unique features in ends of the cab as well. So it's not like everything's got to be exactly the same in both ends. They can be different, but fundamentally, normally they are very similar. So it means we get a nice mix of combination from that. Thanks for reminding me of that, Ed. So this is Northern Trans Pennine.
Yeah.
And Northern Trans Pennine is where we introduced diesel mechanical gearboxes. Mm-hmm. And I think Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, this is pretty much Oh, we skipped West Somerset Rail where we fixed the diesel electric simulation. Oh, I didn't even.
We skipped W.
We skipped West Somerset Railway.
Sorry.
So yes, so West Somerset Railway, we finally fixed the diesel electric simulation. But in NTP, I think this was your first project as well, wasn't it, Ed? If I remember rightly, you did the 45. So this was kind of like all of a sudden we've now got other people outside the route, the company helping us with projects, which was cool, and trying to make that work. And Ed did some really amazing stuff, like so where we did AWS previously, we did it in scripting as kind of a modern electronic AWS for Great Western. For the old BR Blue, Ed learned semigraph to the point that he implemented a completely semigraph version of AWS, which simulates the pneumatics and the old analog style of way those locomotives work. So it's really interesting to see that. But the diesel mechanical gearbox was probably one of the big upgrades for this, because it required new HUD, it required new keys, it required all sorts of things that we needed to think about to make it work. Morgan, this was the first backdated route. So this was the first time it's the first time we did the backdated route on TSW, but it wasn't the first time the team involved had done backdated routes. So they were kind of used to the process of backdating, figuring out research and so forth. But then it raised all the implications. Well, how do you then bring that to life? And actually, we did Manchester Victoria. That was probably a super complicated station, and trying to bring that in this first person world, which was really really interesting. So there was some really cool stuff going on with Northern Transpennine in terms of what we were able to do there.
Yeah. Right, let's go on to the next one. We have main special barn.
So main special barn was our first Trax locomotive, and we did two of them, with the 185.2 and the 146.
Yeah, so I think we've got. I think you asked me for one of each, the 146.2 and the 185, I believe.
Yep.
So I believe we've got this one.
So this is the 185, and then this is the 146.
Yeah.
So it's kind of MSB was sort of it was getting our first Trax locomotive in, and it was good to see. And there was also some improvements on the physics. There was improvements in the signalling and PZB implementation, and I think the way that the cab cars worked again with the 146 as well. So lots of little improvements again as we step forward on this one.
And then we're obviously, after this one, we're properly caught up now with where we are in Trinson World 2. So the next one we've got is the Bakerloo Line. So
Bakerloo Line, I think one of the big innovations there was the camshaft control.
Yeah.
I think it was here it was introduced. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, but I think it was or at least camshaft control got a big redo on this, and which is just again it's the underlying physics, and this was one of the LIRR M3 I think may have been first, possibly Ed, possibly, but I know it got a fair bit, a ton of work for the 72 stock, but this was where we did a route which was half underground.
Yeah.
So where we thought rapid transit was going to be fun to do a few stations light baked, this was 7 miles of light bake, and so the team went through all sorts of learning curve and figuring out how that worked and what processes for do that, and this is where this was much like where Long Island. So probably worth mentioning Long Island. So when we did the timetable for Long Island,
so Ed's just put in the chat, this is where we found metro routes to hell.
Yeah, really. Yes, 185 was RSN. Yes, folks, I saw that. Yeah, a good shout. So on Long Island, one of the things that enabled us to do was really take advantage of a core system in TSW, or core technical feature of TSW, which is that everything is versioned.
Yeah.
So in TS1, we can't touch the dispatcher, for example. If we change any aspect of the dispatcher, the chances are every piece of content that's currently out for TS1 stops working. And you'd have to go back and test it all and fix it all. That's clearly not going to happen, and it's also not fair for people who've got content that's out there that was working. And that applies and there's all sorts of things that are like that. So in TSW, we wanted to try and learn from that, and the underlying implementation of almost every internal component means that different routes and trains can slot in different versions of underlying systems. So in the concept of the dispatcher, so by the time we got to Long Island Railroad, we were on dispatcher version 2.
Yep.
Which was only minor bug fixes from version 1, but we'd called it version 2. And building the Long Island timetable, so much didn't work.
Why?
And just this is going back to the nightmares of trying to make Great Western work and Sandpatch grade work, where I'm reading through massive great log files, and what I'm seeing just isn't making sense. It's just like what I'm reading in the log file is like the back of the train is at the front, or it says it's moving, but it isn't, and on all of these crazy things. And so I ended up going back to the engineering team, and the lead engineer at the time is he took the issues there and basically started creating all sorts of test cases out of them. He ended up with over 100, and because he found all of these things. I wonder if this is what happens. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, I wonder if this is what happens. Oh, no, that doesn't work. So he came up with all of these things, and it was related to trains going into portals and coming out in the wrong order. Or in one instance, the case where the train, so there's a steep gradient just to the east of Jamaica on the Long Island line, and for trains that come up from the likes of Far Rockaway, I think it is. And this train, what would happen is that an AI train would come up and sit on this gradient because there was a red light at the top of the gradient. Another train because another train was in the way. Once that train got out of the way, the signal would go green. The log entry would say, I'm now moving, my target speed is, and then it would say, but I'm not moving, with no reason as to why it's not moving. And when Ben looked into this, he got he had a call with me straight after he figured out what it was, and he was laughing and crying at the same time. And he was just like, you know what this is? A train can't hill start. So what it's doing is it's sitting there, releasing the brakes, the train rolls back, so it puts the brakes back on again.
Yeah.
And it's releasing the brakes, and it's literally just sitting there releasing and applying the brakes constantly because it can't hill start. So it's like, so we fixed that, so now trains can hill start, and now the train can go. So Long Island had like 100 of these small things wrong with it, which was, and that bore out, that became what we call dispatcher version 3, which is, in fact, we're on a much later version now.
Yeah.
But it means that we can, if we find anything like that, we can change it without affecting everything that's gone before, which means we can change it freely. We don't have to worry about how much we're breaking, how many thousands of hours of retesting have we got to do, which obviously becomes more and more and more and more of a problem as there's more content to deal with. There's all of that stuff that we've been able to deal with. Simulgraph is all version controlled. We've had several versions of the diesel electric simulation, for example. But yeah, it's been really good to see that component, that feature of the versioning stuff actually works so well in enabling us to solve these problems without causing ourselves major issues with other stuff.
Yeah. So should we go on to the next one, which is the Colne and the ICE cab? So
this one pretty much was about LZB. I see. Actually, these are slightly out of order of release, but this one was more about getting LZB functionality and was kind of one of the big steps. And the engineering team, it's the wrong ICE cab, Clemmy. It's fine. It's an ICE cab. It's a cab for these purposes.
I'm sure it was from one of the scenarios. I just clicked on it.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, Ed. So the main thing here was about getting LZB in, which is actually quite a big job. The engineering team took quite a bit of time over that, and the end result is really, really good. Actually, it implements a lot of stuff. There's still some nuances that they're working on improvements to, but fundamentally, it's actually a really solid implementation of LZB. So that's kind of like the main thing that came along with this.
And then the next one we have is Southeastern High Speed. Now we've got a couple of pictures here because you wanted me to show off the cab of the Javelin.
Actually, the next one was going to be the LGV, but
It was, but I didn't get a chance to take a picture
Right.
of it.
So let's go back to if we stay where we are for the time being. But one of the things we had a major problem with that we needed to solve for LGV was trains going fast.
Yeah.
And so if you're an Xbox One player or on a low-end PC and you ran the HST at 125 miles an hour, you kept running out of scenery. Yeah,
Oh.
literally the track would run out. You'd still be flying along nothingness because internally the track is it knows where the track is, but all the art would disappear.
Yeah.
The scenery would disappear because you were going faster than it could load it and render it. And so it's kind of like, that's 125 miles an hour. I want to go 200 miles an hour, 300 miles an hour, and I want to do it on an Xbox One still. So the team spent, and Ralph in particular, spent a lot of time looking into what the problem was. And then they ended up redoing most of the way we handle materials. This is, again, one of those things where you look at the decisions that were taken back in Sandpatch Grade days about what made sense for a route where you go 25 miles an hour. And then you try and run those same decisions. And actually the amount of time spent handling those materials, by materials I mean the colors, the textures, that kind of thing, the things that make a surface into a thing in the game.
Sorry, your picture's gone a bit pixely.
Teams, yay!
Give it a minute. Don't worry, he'll go back to normal. That's not help. Just keep talking.
Let me turn my camera off and on again.
I don't think it's the camera. I think it's Teams having a wobbly.
It is Teams having a wobbly, yeah. Never mind. So they ended up rewriting, the whole way we handle these materials, which is now what enables us to do 300 kilometers an hour, 320 kilometers an hour on an Xbox One. So it was. There's been massive steps forward in terms of enabling that to happen, that's really good. And Simulgraph got a similar massive improvement. Go away, Lucas. Right, Southeastern High Speed power changeovers.
Yes.
So
there's a few pictures here as well, and I'll go through all three of them as well, so we can have a look.
So in this route, we had to go from overhead rail to third rail, and they had to behave differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know about the camera problem. There's nothing I can do about it.
It'll calm down in a couple of minutes.
Adhesion was TSW2, Ed. So Southeastern High Speed, we had the overhead power and the third rail power, and they had to behave differently because AC motors, DC motors have different performance characteristics. So at this point, you're almost doing the simulgraph, where you're basically doing the simulgraph for two trains inside one train. We also had 3 different signaling systems, or 4, because you had the TVM 430. I don't know actually if we didn't do KVB on this one. So it's TVM 430 and there was AWS UK system.
Yep.
So this was the first TVM 430 we did, and I think it was the first one. And then obviously you had the AWS as well, and you had the switching between the two systems. Oh, my camera's cleared up.
Yeah, it's been doing it for a few days, but it's only just it clears up after a couple of minutes.
So this was, an interesting challenge for the team to make all of that work, and it was one of those things. Actually, wasn't too bad from what I recall, because actually Simulgraph does that stuff pretty naturally.
Yeah.
So that was quite neat, and that's kind of that was kind of one of the major innovations here. Oh, LGV came out before SE. Okay, so this was taking the TVM across from LGV then, and integrating it with the system, and then having it auto switch between them at the appropriate times as well. So there's quite a bit of complexity going on there.
Yeah, I think we had a couple of high-speed ones coming out. They came out quite close to each other, if I remember correctly.
I mean LGV, and then there was Southeastern High Speed.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, we fixed the high-speed problem, and then we did a bunch of high-speed routes.
But yeah, no, it's like, look, we can go fast, so let's do
let's
it.
go fast.
So after this, the next big milestone on our list is actually one of our most recent releases. So we've got Chemnitz and
Yes.
the tilting
And I'm not
train.
covering every milestone, because
Yeah.
otherwise we'd be here all night, and more all night than we already have been. And but it's kind of, what I'm trying to get across here is, just how much has been advanced in the game.
Yeah.
In this instance, the Chemnitz route is tilting trains.
Yeah.
So this is the first instance where we've got tilting trains in the game, which is obviously very, very cool. There are many examples of tilting in the world, and this gets us our first one, and all of the required. And again, this is not just make a BR612. This is implement all of the core technology for tilting systems, and then build a 612 using it.
Yeah.
So it was, there's all sorts of really cool stuff that's been added throughout to the game throughout building this stuff.
And I think it's very easy when you're playing it and you come across issues to focus on the issues, because they're not fun. But it's nice to actually highlight some of the things that we've done well, and areas where we've improved, and new features we've added.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's there's an awful lot going on. In terms of development. We've had a 6-person strong engineering team now for a long term. That's a lot of engineering time, and they've not been idle. So there's a lot of work been going on to add the core features that are needed. And you compare this back to the the Sandpatch grade sim world that came out in the original days, and this game is an order of magnitude bigger now than it was back then. Crazy says, was making a diesel tilting train easier than an electric one would be? Don't think it'd be any different. The only extra complexity you'd have is the pantograph, because the pantographs, I think in some cases counter tilt, so that they stay straight, but I dare say that's not rocket science to resolve. Fundamentally, it was more, we wanted to make this route, it needed a tilting train, let's do tilting trains.
Right, so the next one we have is actually, your face is in the way here. Actually, we're gonna move the wrong thing. Gonna move you down.
Ooh, I'm moving. I'm falling. Oh.
So we actually have the menu here for the Diesel Legends, which actually sometimes gets a bit of a bad reputation. But why are we showing off the menu of Diesel Legends here?
Diesel Legends introduced the ability to have multiple timetables on a route. Whereas previously, fundamentally, every timetable had one and only one timetable. By doing Diesel Legends, we made it to where we can have multiple timetables on a route, which means multiple broad experiences that you can have on a route as well in different ways. I mean, it's been used a few cases since then, like the 1938 version of the Bakerloo Line timetable, and East Coast Way. We used it so that you could have, without losing the ability to use all of the Seaford services using the 377. You also then get a timetable which then correctly swaps the 313 in if you've got the 313. So it's enabled us to be a lot more flexible and open the doors to a lot of things, and it was done as part of the Diesel Legends thing. So like Diesel Legends or not, it introduced the core technology that enables us to have this multiple timetables. So it inspired, if you like, that another decent leap in terms of what we're able to do.
So what I'm going to do now is just put your face back.
Yay, I'm rising again.
And then let's go on to the next screenshot. And I think everybody's going to know what this one's showing off, which is rush hour passengers.
Rush hour passengers. London commuter users need not apply, unfortunately.
Yes.
But
before anybody asks, we are well aware of it. We are
well aware of it.
Yeah.
And London commuter needs to be stable before we make it less stable.
But it's not forgotten.
Definitely not forgotten. So this was Boston was where we first launched the rush hour passengers, and increased, which is the increased variety, the new outfits, the correct response to weather, so that you get in the cold weather, you get the evening, you get the coats and things on, and also the increased volume of passengers, so that an Xbox and a PlayStation 4 went from 20 to 100. And the PC and Generation 9 consoles went from 100 to 200. So there's a big increase in the volume of passengers that are walking around. And I know that Adam's team have been doing a really good job of starting to bring some of that into the Preserve Crew routes. So you start to see that as the Preserve Crew routes updates come out, you should start to see rush hour passengers appearing on them as well.
Which is great. Taze said they need umbrellas in the rain, though. I know. I wish they had umbrellas in the rain as well. Like,
We know.
We want them as much as you do.
Unfortunately, that's where you start animating accessories on
Yeah.
passengers, and oh my word, that turns out to be hard.
No, I can imagine. And then we've got which one's this? Sherman Hill with our very
Sherman
long
Hill.
trains. And then I actually had so much fun. I'm sorry, you're moving your face again. No, moving the thing. Now I'm moving your face. Look, your face is just in the way, I'm afraid. But yeah, I had a lot of fun getting this particular picture because it doesn't actually even do it justice, because that is literally, so I'm facing left and then I'm facing, no, wrong one, and then I'm facing right. And it just keeps going. I could have just kept on going. I could have probably had about 6 pictures of the same train.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, having spent a bunch of time improving and optimizing Simigraph, we were able to get trains much more approaching the correct length that they should have been. So Sampatch grade, they were generally 40 to 50 freight cars, which is really about half of what you want them to be. So Sherman Hill, they're all about 100 freight cars. And it makes a massive difference to the way the train drives, having a train that much longer. Makes it a lot harder to drive, which makes it a lot more of a challenge. But in it, as well as having the long trains on there, I also want to call out our lead engineer on this, because full credit to him, this is why we have all the container variety that's in there. He took it upon himself to make it to update some materials and do some clever stuff with the way the containers are used, so that we've got the long and the short containers that the art team had built. We've got the branded containers, coloured containers, all sorts of combinations, and it just makes those trains look so much more interesting than if we just had the branded ones in there. And it's great to get them. Obviously, the one container is my favourite one for some strange reason.
Yeah, I wonder why.
But if it had just been the pink, the red, and the yellow or orangey containers of the branded ones, that train would have looked a lot less interesting than it does now. So, I'm really, really thankful that that was able to be done, because it makes a huge difference, and that has been incorporated into other things. Adam's shown it on his Great Western update, for example. So we'll see this kind of thing appearing in some of the other. In some of the other routes going forward as well, as they get updated, because it's a nice bit of reusable core tech that we can bring into other places, that then make those trains look more diverse. So yeah, that's really cool. So it was really good to see on Sherman Hill, that and the long trains.
And then we're going over to Clinchfield.
So Clinchfield is more about the sort of going back to older style diesels, and kind of almost starting from scratch in some ways, just because in terms of Simigraph and the way that these things work, the older style control stand that's on there, which is not just a different 3D model with different controls, it's a whole new way of doing Simigraph and how all of those controls are then used. So there was an awful lot of relearning for the team and figuring out how these old F7s and how the SD40 was different to the SD40-2, in more detail, and getting all of the nuances of these things important, because the nuances where a lot of these differences are, and they're important to capture. So it's one of the things that James, who looks after a lot of all the Simigraph stuff pretty much, is really, really good at digging into what's important, where these things are. He's really good at finding the manuals and tech specs for a lot of the trains, so that we can actually find all these weird graphs for all sorts of things, and then circuit diagrams and all sorts of things, so we can really then say, it does it like that, okay, and then he creates a Simigraph around these things.
I remember in the lead up to Clinchfield releasing, I actually spoke to the Loco team and the setup team, and I spoke to James, and he was incredibly busy, as I'm sure you can imagine, and very stressed, and he very generously made the time to talk to me. And my goodness, this knowledge he has when he's creating this stuff on Simigraph, he just doesn't hold back. It's incredible. So the depth he goes to get the correct information is quite staggering.
Yeah, and it's really important to them to dig into that stuff as much as possible. And we're building up the beta team now to provide, so that James and the other members of the setup team can actually now ask questions. What happens when you press that button?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? What's that button doing? So, for example, on the F7, there's a switch that says 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's been this myth for a long time in the community, and particularly manifested in how it's been implemented in some of the trains, that is, so let's say, for example, there are 2 locos, you set it to 2 to drive both locos, and if you set it to 1, only the lead loco will drive. That's not what it does at all. Yep. We were looking in the manual and going, there's no, in fact, I think it was the circuit diagram we were looking at going, but the power's not connected to this. It's only the dynamic brake that's actually connected to this. And then it was worked out that, it was related to how you get an electrical signal loss the further down the train that you get to. So if you've got 4 vehicles and you apply a dynamic brake of, say, 5, by the time the electronic signal has reached its way down to the 4th vehicle, it's not going to give you brake 5 anymore. It's going to give you brake 3 or something, which means you're not getting the braking you want. So that 1, 2, 3, 4 boosts the signal, so that you compensate for that, essentially. So it's kind of digging into that level of detail and finding out the detail of what that stuff actually means. It was really cool, and there was a lot of that with this stuff on Clinchfield. And actually, someone mentioned earlier on the other thing that this was Clinchfield was a first for, although there wasn't any really new tech to do it, but it was a first in terms of assets and so forth. This was our first caboose or brake van.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. I was so glad to see that. We actually built we started building a caboose for Sandpatch Grade a very, very long time ago, almost part of one of the early prototypes, but it didn't get finished. It's kind of in bits at the moment. So we tried a couple of times to sort of do something with the caboose, and we made a concerted effort to make sure it was part of Clinchfield, so that's why
I remember there was a lot of excitement when we announced that there was a caboose.
Oh yeah, it was
that got a really good reaction.
It was certainly there's so many things I love about Clinchfield, and the old F7 train and the caboose are probably right up there at the top of my favourites for it.
And then we actually have one more image, and this one's actually probably a bit of a touchy subject for some people, but I do think it's still worth us talking about. So obviously we have Creators Club. Again, I'm gonna move your face. And Creators Club, up until last week, had actually been going pretty well. But it is worth highlighting that it's still in beta. But when it's working, it opens a lot of variety to the players. And it's actually incredible seeing what the community have been able to create with Creators Club.
Yeah, so Creators Club has opened the door to cross-platform sharing of user-created content. So it's kind of like we've now got the platform to start, what else can we do here? How can the tools we've got be expanded? Because now Creators Club is out, we can start thinking about what those enhancements might look like, because that's something that everyone's been talking about wanting. It's... so there's lots of stuff we can do it, but the key thing is that we've got all the facilities in place now for the foundations of Creators Club. And when we first launched Sandpatch Grade and we first came out with CSX Heavy Haul, that very first release, I said right back then that this isn't just a release of a train simulator. This is a journey, and hopefully you've seen over the last 55 hours of this stream that
I know it does. Oh my goodness! It does. It's been 55 hours. Yeah.
There's been a heck of a journey, and there is still more journey to come. And Creators Club was actually a massive milestone in that, because having created the tools, it was one of the number one request was, now let me share my stuff that I've made, and Creators Club enabled that. So it's kind of validated that was the right thing to do, the team obviously looking at how they can expand on it. But this is also a good opportunity to just remind everybody to make sure your game is getting updated.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So obviously, we recognise that the most recent issue has been quite severe for some people. And we are doing everything we can, aren't we, to try and help them recover their missing liveries if we can. And we should have more information for you on that by the end of next week. And even if the information is we have no information, we're going to tell you that. So We will keep you updated with that process as we progress with it. But yes, on Friday, most of you will, well, not most of you, everybody will have received an update across all platforms to your game. It will only have been a very small update to core. Please make sure that you update your game. Make sure that you update it before Monday if you want to use Creators Club. Because when you log in, if you haven't updated, you run the risk of losing your liveries that you've created yourself. If you update it, you'll be fine, and it's to help fix the problem.
So the update, it has the fix that causes the deletion, and at the moment Creators Club is turned off to allow everyone time to get the game updated. Once we turn Creators Club on, then if you've still got the bad code will get executed. So make sure you let the game update. So I know a number of people, because of the issue, have held off updating the game. Now is the time to update it. And
please, if you run a community, if you talk in one of your communities quite a lot, if you've got friends that play Train Sim, please spread the word that everybody needs to update their game on Monday, because Monday is when we will be turning Creators Club back on.
Name Goes Here asks a very good question. How do we check if the game is up to date? So tomorrow we're going to try and put out an article showing what the version numbers are for each platform. So I don't have what those are at the moment. So we'll get those dug out and we'll put those up. So check. And we will the easy thing between now and then, on Steam, do a verify local files. If it says everything is fine, you have the latest version. And I'm guessing the other platforms have got an equivalent function for just check for updates or something. So do that.
Most of them will prompt you to update. Will have prompted you to update on Friday without you even realizing. It's very good chance that it just updated automatically on console, and on Steam it usually, I don't believe you can play until you've updated. So there's a good chance that most of you have already updated. But it's best. It will give you all the information you need, and then just double check.
Yes, absolutely. So, but no, Creators Club overall has been, barring the blip, rather large blip. It's been actually, it's proven that it's the right way to go, and it's been used so well by the community as well. It's there's always the concern about how something like this can be misused. And the fact that there's already been, I think, 2 licenses added onto the mix saying they're interested is like Avanti, I think, recently, is just, validates, you're doing really good stuff, folks, and thank you. It's, they're excited by what they're seeing. We're excited by what we're seeing that you're all doing with it. So keep it up. It's it's an amazing addition to the variety of what you can do. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Me too. And I absolutely love just looking at what everybody makes, because it's just incredible. God, it's just so good. I could spend hours just looking through everybody's pictures.
No, it's fantastic. So so that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of some of the key moments, and I've probably forgotten some other key moments that there were along the way, because there's so many. But it's been such a journey from the start to here, and like I said, it's been a privilege working with the team, and just one of my favorite things about working here is I work with some of the most amazingly talented people, and see what they're producing and so forth, and it's brilliant. I've fallen down the bomb. And it's so it's great, and we've come a long way, and there is more to go. No teasers tonight, I'm afraid. So
no
teasers for anybody else. It's but it's not, this is, we've always had a vision of where we want to go, and we are still walking that vision. But by the same token, we're not tied to that vision. Creators Club and Livery Designer, Livery Designer to some extent, and Creators Club to a lesser extent, we're not necessarily part of the day one vision for it. And we decided, actually, based on what we're seeing and what people want, this is a good thing to do. So we're always looking at, reacting to the surveys, to what you see in the forums and so forth. So it's been, really, we are listening to you, but
Yes.
we do have a general compass for where we're going, and yes, it's been really good. Train Simulator Driver Out. When are we getting fish vans? You'll have to look at the bottom of the sea for those. I'm afraid I dropped those. Um,
But yeah, so I guess look, this has been a good look at the past 5 years, and I guess like it'll be interesting to see what's to come in the next 5 years, really.
yeah, bigger and better, onwards and upwards. There'll be some exciting stuff, but look at how the game has changed in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I don't really see that momentum changing, to be honest. It's we've got the biggest engineering team now, I think, than we've ever had developing core tech, and the biggest team developing content that's ever been in the game. So it's it's really exciting, and it's just wow. What can I say? It's great. It really is great fun.
And you're going to keep loving it for the
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. It's again one huge milestone. I've just completely remember. A massive milestone was when we launched Great Western on consoles.
Oh, of course.
Which involved re-architecting great big chunks of the game and rebuilding it. And we went from a game where, when we first started looking at console, we could get one tile loaded without any kind of scenery or trains or track, and it worked badly.
Yep.
And now look at it. The amount of work that's gone into making the game run on console to where we don't have to code everything multiple times has been an epic thing. And one of my most proud things, the things I'm most proud of, is that we've delivered that train simulation experience to the console audience as well as not just being on a PC. So it's and I know that there was so much work from the team went into just almost rebuilding great big chunks of the game from scratch, to be honest, is what it ended up being, to make it run efficiently enough. And no toilets.
No toilets. No toilets. I believe that's entirely Sam's fault, that desire for toilets.
No, Sam. I think that Sam is more feeding off the. I know Sam wants the toilets, but it's that came long before.
Okay, that came before Sam. Okay.
It's and I can't fault it. It's that whole I walk up to a door, it doesn't work. I now want that door to work.
Yeah, no, naturally. Yeah.
But no, the toilets will remain locked. That is not in the vision.
Well, excellent. I think that's probably about it for tonight, Matt. I mean, I'm sure you could keep going for another 2 hours if I let you.
Let me just fire up PowerPoint real quick.
Yeah. That PowerPoint presentation. It was what, 20 slides? 30.
You did that though.
No. Well, look. Thank you so much for talking about the past 5 years and how it's progressed. It's been really interesting for me as well to actually listen to all of this and to see like those videos and what it used to look like. So that's it for this weekend's March Madness streams. Next week, during the week, I don't think we have any. I think it's March Madness again on the weekend. So I believe it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday streams. And I will be posting the schedule tomorrow because, as you can tell, I'm not 100% on that right now.
Look over for the week for the schedule, and don't forget the sailors on.
The sailors
and
on,
see if there's anything interesting.
There's some cracking deals on there at the moment on Steam. So go and have a look if you've been waiting to expand your collection. Now's the time to do it. Lovely stuff. Well, I will speak to you all soon, and thanks for joining us.
Lovely. Thanks, everybody. Take care.